different kind of
Yeah. Okay, we're going to start here in a minute. As soon as Mr. James gives me a high sign, which he just did, and so we will begin with questions, comments, considerations from the gathered masses here. Who has something that they want to find out more about, or something along those lines? Anybody, everybody, nobody, somebody. I don't see any requests for, yes, there is a request for a hand. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, request for a hand?
Yes.
Okay, I need a hand.
Hey.
My question is a little bit old, that it's been a while. Marty has a friend who decided that she was going to go to a Messianic Jew church.
Okay.
And she was saying that the Messianic Jews are so much better. They follow all of the guidelines from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And Marty was told the girl, I don't think I could do that because I'll miss my cheeseburgers and my bacon and everything. The Messianic Jews go by the
Dietary law?
dietary laws. Thank you.
They're
Yes.
supposed to.
Yeah. All of the ones that I know are strictly
The ones I
dietary law.
And your question is?
I was just wondering, is there something ultra special being a Messianic Jew versus an Orthodox Christian?
Okay, so you want to know, are Messianic Jews, that is, Jews who believe Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, and yet keep all the Old Testament laws, or at least those that they can, are they better and or special, more so than historic Orthodox biblical Christians? Real simple answer, no. Real simple answer. Real simple answer. Why? Well, want to spend some time in the Bible? This is Bible class, isn't it? Yes, it is. Okay.
I'd ask questions that'll open that book.
Okay. Let's open that book to Book of Colossians. You know, you can always find Colossians, right? Because of a horse's name. It was a famous racehorse many years ago called Galafilco. Galafilco. And somebody asked the owner, why is the horse called Galafilco? And the owner said, because I am a conservative Christian, and I like St. Paul, and so I named my horse out of the 4 letters of Paul: Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Galafilco. Galafilco. You can always find Colossians after Philippians, okay? All right. Now, Colossians is in some ways like Galatians in that it's a comparison with the way of the Jews, okay, and the way of the New Testament church, all right? So let's look at, starting off, chapter 2, verse 21. Down at the bottom of page 1843. 1843. Well, let's go back to verse 20 real quick here. Verse 20 says, if you have died with Christ. Now, what does that mean, died with Christ? That means you're a believer. Okay, you've been baptized, buried, drowned, whatever, with Him, so you've died with Christ. You're a believer, right? So if you're a believer, you have died with Christ to what? The elementary principles of the world. What are the elementary principles of the world? That is the law. Now you can think of elementary principles as the law written in your heart, you know, do not kill, you know, etc., etc., etc. Or you can think of them as law in general, all kinds of laws which would include the civil and ceremonial law. How have we died to even the moral law? Well, because Christ accomplished the moral law for us in our place. Okay? Now that does not mean we don't keep the moral law, we still do. But we have died to it as far as law motivation. Right? We are not motivated by God's anger, God's wrath, because of our sins. We are motivated because of Christ's sacrifice in our place. Right? So you have died to the elementary principles of the world or the law. Why? As if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. In other words, since you are a believer, and since the law is not your motivation, got that? The law is not to be your motivation, then why, rhetorical question means we know the answer, okay? Why are you allowing yourself to be told by other people, you can't eat that, you can't wear that, you can't go here, you can't do this, etc., 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 etc. With the rhetorical question's answer being, you shouldn't. Of course not. That's ridiculous. Okay? Since Christ accomplished all of the Old Testament prophecies, fulfilled them all, and He fulfilled all the law in our place, we are no longer subject to the law. Only law we are subject to, if you only want to call it that, okay, the only motivation, let's use that, let's go back to that. The only motivation we are subject to is the motivation of the gospel. In other words, out of love for Christ, we do not commit adultery. Out of love for Christ, we do not murder or hate our neighbor. Out of love for Christ. Now, Is it possible that people can, out of love for Christ, not eat bacon? Sure, it's possible. But they have no business whatsoever telling you not to eat bacon. In other words, because the motivation is gospel-oriented, and because the gospel is believed by individuals, right? So the individuals then are motivated as individuals, that is, by their conception, if you will, or their understanding of the gospel. People who are raised as Jews, Old Testament Jews, therefore may have a real hard time chowing down to pork chops. All right, that's understandable. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but it does not mean they're better. It means they're different. Right? If a Christian decides, either early in his life or later on, I can't handle alcohol. I just can't. Okay? Or, as in my eldest son's case, I don't like it. Gave him sips of beer as a kid, yeah. Gave him sips of wine, yeah. Didn't care for it. My eldest daughter, on the other hand, can I have some more, please? Why? Because people are different. Okay? And so my son, my oldest son, chose to be a teetotaler. He doesn't impose it on me. He doesn't impose it on anyone else. That's just the way he is. Other people in their lives, maybe after college, a lot of bingers in college or whatever, decide, hey, this is not good for me. This is messing me up. I'm getting in trouble. Da da da. I'm gonna go on the way. Okay. But again, they don't force it on other people. But out of their love for Christ, that they don't want to mess up their lives. They want to be good witnesses or whatever, or they want to be able to use their talents and abilities given to them by God. They don't use that. Or, even though now it's legal in a lot of places, marijuana, people would say, well, I don't want to mess up my brain, okay? And so out of gospel motivation, right? As soon as some of these people tell you that you're not a good Christian or less of a Christian because of something they do, they are dead wrong. Absolutely, completely, and totally wrong. Okay? Turn the page. Which all refer to things destined to perish with use. Perish with use. Maybe a better translation would be perish in use. That is, the use of it will go away. You won't have them anymore. Okay? Or you won't need them anymore. Maybe it's even better. Okay? In accordance with the commandments and teachings of men. Okay? You do not follow the laws or commandments of men in order to be a good Christian. You follow the commandments of God. And even that you do only. The only God-pleasing following of the law, if you want to call it that, is with gospel motivation. You probably heard sermons or heard comments about our good works are tainted. Well, have you ever asked yourself, what are they tainted with? Maybe they're tainted with inexactness. In other words, we try to keep a certain law and we don't do it completely or fully because maybe we're ignorant or we just don't understand it. I guess that's tainted. But the big thing that the law, go ahead, Tony. The big thing that our works are tainted with is self-righteousness. That's the big thing. Okay? That's the thing that needs to be cleansed by Jesus. And so when the Bible, or you hear sermons or Bible classes where the preacher or whatever will talk about our good works being cleaned before they're presented to God, cleaned by Christ, before they're presented, that's mostly what they're talking about. Because our motivation is not always pure. Sometimes we do good things, that is, we keep God's commandments in order to impress Him. in order to make a deal with him. If I do this, maybe you do that. In order to pay back God, let's say, for our sins, which is stupid because Jesus already paid the full and complete price. So our motivations are not always pure. But what we are comforted with is that God purifies them. Jesus purifies them and presents them to his Father. So they are pure. So, folks, all of this keeping of the law, again, if the motivation is for Christ in some way, that's fine. But that is an individual choice. Okay? I don't tell people here they have to come to communion every Sunday. If you don't want to take the Lord's Supper every single Sunday, that's fine. Now, if you don't take it more than once or twice a year, I'll have questions for you. But if you're not there every Sunday, I won't. I will never come up and badger you and say, "Well, how come you aren't at the table?" No. If I see a pattern, maybe. I don't order anybody to do that. I don't order anybody, but if you don't take the common cup, I got pastor friends that will not use individual cups in their church service. Will not. They refuse. Okay? Matter of fact, I have got one friend, and we argue about this all the time. He questions the validity of the wine in individual cups. He said, that's not what this do means, because Jesus had a common cup. And so this do means common cup. Ooh, wow. Okay? To me, that's law motivation. You know, that's turning the gospel into a law. I don't go along with that kind of thing. Okay? Just like even coming to church. All right? If you're not feeling into it, all right, for whatever reason, you're physically sick or emotionally tired out or whatever, maybe you're just not going to get anything out of it. I wouldn't agree necessarily. I'm not going to jump down your throat and say, well, you're not here one Sunday or 2 Sundays. Again, you're only here once or twice a year. No, I might have some questions. But you see what I mean? I don't order people. You don't have to do what you have to do and do the thing. Okay? The moral laws out there. Hey, think about them out there. But I hope you keep them, not because you have to, but because you want to. So that's what Paul's talking about. These are matters which have, to be sure, the appearance. Notice this. Really good thing. The appearance of wisdom in self-made religion. Messianic Judaism has got some things right. Believe in the Trinity, believe in Jesus, believe in that. But they got a lot of things wrong, folks. Messianic Judaism, for the most part, is Arminian in theology, that is decision theology, most of them. Messianic Judaism also, is not real Judaism. How do we know that? Real simple. They pick and choose what part of the ceremonial law they're going to keep. When they start sacrificing sheep and goats and bulls on an altar, well, you have to be in Jerusalem, of course, to be accurate. We don't believe them. But what is this business? I mean, would that have ever been allowed by Moses? Would that have ever been allowed by the prophets? Would that have ever been allowed by anybody in the Old Testament? Well, we're going to keep the food laws, but as for the sacrificial laws, we're not going to keep those. Absolutely not. If you want to find out why the Israelites were finally taken off into Babylon, read the end of the book of 2 Chronicles. Read the end of the book of 2 Chronicles, it will tell you very clearly. God speaking, and he says, now my land will finally get its rest. What's he talking about? He's talking about the fact that the Jews in their entire history, from the time they crossed the Jordan River till they hauled off into Babylon, almost 1,000 years, they never once practiced the year of Jubilee. They never once practiced the Sabbath year. Not one time. And that's a relatively small part of the ceremonial law. And for that reason, they were hauled off to Babylon. So, you think God cares about the whole ceremonial law? You bet. Otherwise, why would he bother giving it? Folks, Messianic Jews love them to death. I mean, they're nice people, fantastic people, fine believers. But boy, are they screwed up. Pardon my French. They are really messed up. Because if they're true Messianic Jews, they're slicing and dicing animals all day long. And they're not doing it. They're not even bothered. Okay. They're not even bothered bringing the showbread offering, or the wheat offering, or any of the other offerings that they wouldn't get yelled at by Peter. Right? So I say to them, and I have to some of them, come on, often. If you don't want to eat bacon, don't eat bacon. You don't tell me I'm not a good believer and you're a better believer because you don't eat bacon. You think you are? There you go. St. Paul's word, folks, right there. I mean, it's spelled out clear as bell. Right? Clear as a bell. Self-made religion, self-abasement, and severe treatment of the body, get the last part, but are no value against fleshly indulgence. In other words, don't do a thing for your sin. You're just as much of a sinner as you would be otherwise. So fine, don't eat. Okay? It doesn't help you not sin. Why? Because it's not a sin-eating bacon. Unless your doctor is concerned about your cholesterol. You see what I'm saying, folks? Okay? It's really clear. There are other sections too in Paul's writing where he talks about it. Don't let anybody judge you on new moon, what day you're going to go to church. Don't let anybody judge you on the Sabbath. Okay? Don't let anybody judge you on what you eat. Don't let anybody judge you on what you drink. Everything that God has made is good for food. And he goes into very good, great detail in that section. He says, you can even eat meat sacrificed to idols. Of course, there's a caveat with that about people with weak faith, but that's not about the food. That's about faith. And I can't answer it any better than that. I mean, I could. If you give me a whole hour and let me write down some stuff and make notes, I can do it. If you want to pick Messianic Judaism sometime, we can do that. I did a little bit when we talked about Judaism, but folks, it's just nonsense, okay? And I say that with all due respect. I respect these people, and I respect their path to salvation, but I'm sorry. When people tell Marty or you or somebody that kind of stuff, they tell you, well, you're not a good Christian because so and so. You need to get a little PO. You really do. You need to get a little irritated, and you need to hit them really hard with passages like this. Which, like I said, walk more. And you need to stomp it out fast and quick and kill it dead. Because it's deadly stuff. Kurt had his hand up first. Kurt?
These pastors that insist on the common cup, do they also have one loaf of bread that they break off?
Some do. Yeah. You can buy nowadays, a big wafer, about yay big, and it has perforations where you can break off pieces. Yeah. I don't know. I think he actually uses bread. I mean, he uses like a big pita or something. And I think maybe he breaks it up ahead of time. I'm not 100% sure. I've had a few people that have visited his church back when it was Wells. He's now in the Missouri Synod, English district now, which makes perfect sense. But anyway, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I mean, and he to the wine. Because we know Jesus added water to the wine, because that's what the Passover does. Just like I do when we have Passover here. That's no question about that. There is no question, by the way. Even the greatest scholars admit that if you're going to do completely, then you're going to have water to the wine, you're going to have one loaf, and you're going to have one cup.
You should only have 3 once a year.
Well, but Jesus did say, do this often. So, once a year is not often. Not often. Okay. Now, Bruce.
Okay, two things about the bread. That big Lutheran church in El Paso that overlooks the Rio Grande.
Right, yes.
Once a month, we used to do, not confirmation, what's it called when we go up and get the wine? I don't know why I drew a blank.
Common cup?
Communion.
Oh, once a
Once
month,
a
yeah.
month, he would do it with common cup only and loaves of bread.
Yeah.
Where he would break bread and give it to you.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were trying to do, that they were trying to match what
Yeah.
this will do. About the Messianics, you know, I go to a Bible
Yeah,
study
right.
every other Thursday,
Yeah.
and there's about 60% are Messianic, the other ones are Christians. And us Christians, we order a grilled cheese with bacon. I've had shrimp fried rice. They don't say anything about they get the vegetable. We don't argue about that because they know that's my belief or our belief and that's their belief. We never ever clash. We're always in agreement because we're here to walk in God's.
Right. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
But I do know of some who are very adamant that we're not that we're not a good Christian.
And so do I. And so to me, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
It happens.
No matter what you show them, it says that the food laws are no longer.
I know. I know.
And I asked them once, I said, you guys are always talking about the celebrations and, the festivals.
Yeah.
Do you guys still sacrifice animals?
Yeah.
And they go, well, no. I said, so why is that any different than the other things? So.
Or it's like they keep Yom Kippur, okay, the first of the year, but they don't keep the Day of Atonement the way it is in the Bible.
Right.
I mean, they observe it, but not the way it is in the Bible. And the Bible is very clear what you're supposed to do on the Day of Atonement. Very clear. Okay? And they'll do it.
What does it say?
What? Well, it talks about sacrifices for one.
Oh, okay.
And it talks about everybody going to Jerusalem.
Right.
Get on a plane. Give the Muslims credit. Give the Muslims credit. When it comes to the Hajj, when that time of year comes around for the Hajj, it's a 30-day period in their year. When it comes to time, they all go to Mecca. Or if they can afford it.
At least once in their life.
At least once in their lifetime. Give them credit for that. I would tell the Messianic Jews, hey, if you're going to insist on this, then again, you need to go for Day of Atonement, at least. You need to go once a year, once in your life to Jerusalem. Now, maybe a lot of that, I don't know. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Yes, sir.
Let's change the subject.
That's fine.
Critical race theory.
Yeah.
What's the basic tenet of that, and is there any biblical aspects to it at all?
Do we do this?
Gary might not be.
Yeah, you might not have been here. Okay. Critical race theory. All right. Basically, what it says is this: is that every single person who is not of well, to put it a different way. Every single person who is Caucasian, right? I'll put that. Every single person who is Caucasian is born into the world as a racist. Make it automatic. You can't help it. You come out of the womb as a racist and a bigot. If you're white skinned, or if you're not a minority of some kind, brown skin, black skin, whatever, oriental, yellow, as we call them. If you're any other, if you're white, you're a racist. If you're any other color, you're not a racist. That's in a nutshell. Okay? And therefore, all of history, all of society's norms, you might say, everything in current events, all of it needs to be seen through the lens of your racism and bigotry. Okay? And then, of course, correct it. So we must correct the past history. Right? We must tell everybody George Washington was a out-and-out racist bigot. It wasn't just Robert E. Lee that was. It was George Washington, and it was Thomas Jefferson, and Hamilton, and Madison,
Lincoln.
huh?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln, absolutely, no question about it. Abraham Lincoln, and I don't know if you know this, but when he was running for Senate, Abraham Lincoln advocated that all the blacks should be rounded up and sent back to Africa. No. That was Abraham Lincoln's solution to the slave problem. Round them all up, take them away from the plantation owners, whether they like it or not. Okay? Go down there under martial law, take their slaves, put them on a boat, send them to a place that was already created for them. Country of Liberia. Look it up on a map. Look up the history of Liberia in Africa. You will find out that it was settled by American slaves. And it was set up by the United States government as a refuge, so that slaves could go back to Africa. There was a movement in the 30s, 1830s and 40s, and even into the 50s, back to Africa. This was the American solution. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln was a supporter of that, and so obviously he's racist, no question about it. Now, even though Hernan Cortez, you might say a Spaniard, and as a Spaniard, he does have some mixed blood, if you will, okay, a little Moorish in there, but Spaniards would be considered Caucasian. And so the Spaniard, a guy like Hernan Cortez, there's no question now. It used to be a big question, what happened to Montezuma? History tells us Montezuma got sick and died. They say, well, the Spaniards cleaned that up. The fact of the matter is, Cortez killed him. We have no proof of that, but that's now what you'll hear. If you sit in a Spanish colonial history class in college, you will hear that Hernan Cortez murdered Montezuma II, the fifth and last emperor of the Aztecs. Who, by the way, the Aztecs murdered their own people at a pretty good clip, and also murdered anybody else that they could get their hands on. cut their hearts out and ate them. So anyway, that's critical race theory is you are a bigot, you are a racist, whether you know it or not. Most of it comes out, again, sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't, but you're colored by that. Everything you say, everything you think, everything you do is racist, and therefore you need to pay reparations, and you need to rethink your whole life. And you need to always put minorities ahead of yourself. And the idea is this, that if we take all of the Caucasians, all the white people, and take them out of power, automatically, because of the color of their skin, and put colored people of various kinds in their position, and we leave it that way for 500 years, then finally, everything will balance out.
But the whole country would be Chicago.
That is a racist comment.
There are no white people in charge of Chicago.
Bruce, facts have nothing to do with
Oh, I know that. I know that.
critical race theory was invented in the 70s by a bunch of college professors who had nothing better to do with it.
That were tenured.
By the way, they're all white.
They felt guilty for their success.
It's what do they call it? It's taking Kipling's white man's burden to the logical conclusion. White man's burden was always looked down upon, by the way, because it's thought of as being condescending. But Kipling's white man's burden, if you follow his thinking all the way to the end, this is what you come up with. And I'm a great lover, as you all know, in the service today. I'm a great lover of Richard Kipling. He's a good guy. I think he was a Christian. He didn't belong to the church, but I think he was a Christian. But anyway, white man's burden is basically, we do have all the rights. Yeah, we really do. And it's too bad, so maybe we ought to lift these guys off. As a matter of fact, maybe we ought to put them above us. So they can kind of feel what we feel.
Other countries in the world have the same type of teaching now.
Most of Europe, and especially Australia. Australia is feeling very, very guilty lately about its Aborigines, which frankly they ought to. You know, it's like us. We ought to feel bad about our average. We really ought to feel bad about our average. But we don't necessarily. Again, why? Well, because we look on the reservations and we say, see, they gave their own country, look what they did with it. But that would be called racist. That would be called bigotry. Yeah.
But they got us back there at the casino.
Yeah. They get a lot of
Right
variety.
now they get the reparations in buckets.
All right, let's go back to Romanism. I want to be able to wrap this up for a very good reason, and that is because so I may skip around a little bit, okay? And that is because I gave the vicar material on Mary, which is our next section, and I want him to be able to start fresh. Okay. So page 89. First, I want to talk about sacramentals. Okay. When you see a Roman Christian, Protestant symbols, when you see a Roman Christian handling their beads, okay, when you see the Roman Christian dipping their hands in holy water, various of these things, these are called not sacraments. These are called sacramentals. Right? Sacrament. Now, the Romans themselves, few that I know, will use that term. They will just say they're holy practices. But that's what they're called. Paragraph 96. While the sacraments were instituted by Jesus Christ, most but not all of the sacramentals were instituted by the church. The sacraments give grace of themselves and are always fruitful when the faithful place no spiritual obstacles in the way. Okay, what does that mean? Put in a different way, put in different words, that crossing yourselves or using holy water or whatever are beneficial to your spiritual life as long as you don't misuse them. Okay? Use the holy water to put on your motorcycle so you can win a race. That's not proper use. Right? So they would say you're not going to get any fruit out of that. You're not going to get any spiritual benefit. And making the sign of the cross too can become superstitious. And when it becomes superstitious, like a good luck charm kind of thing, then it's not really functioning the way it's supposed to. The sacramentals excite pious disposition of feelings by means of which the faithful may obtain grace. It is not the sacramental itself that gives grace, but the devotion, the love of God, or sorrow for sin that it inspires, and the prayers of the church that render sacramentals efficacious against evil. And so it's not the sign itself, or it's not the water itself, or it's not the saint's medal itself, or it's not the dirt from the tomb of Jesus itself, or whatever else you want to talk about. It is the thinking behind it, and the prayers of the church for it. Okay? And then it's kind of everybody's on the same page. Everybody's involved. Okay? So that you've got all these people, every time they do that, okay, then it benefits you when you do that same thing. Take, for example, all along the highways in the west here, and even sometimes in the east, the crosses with flowers and stuff by them very often, okay? You're supposed to, if you are a Roman, or really any Christian, as you drive by there, you're supposed to make the sign of the cross. Why? Well, because the thought is that a person died there who did not get the last rites. Right? So they miss on that particular sacrament. Most Romans try to get 6 out of 7. I don't say that in a joking way, but that's true. Because you can't get all 7. Why?
Can't get married and holy orders.
Yeah, you can't get holy orders, which is sacrament, and be married. Or if you're married, you can't have holy orders. Now, you can, of course, if you're an Episcopalian who changes churches. If you're an Episcopalian who becomes Roman and you're married and you're Episcopal, then you come over to a Roman church. You can bring your wife with you. But 9 times out of 10, I've been told that most of the wives didn't go into a convent. Question?
What if you're a widower? You've had marriage, you're widowed, they can do holy order, and you've got all seven.
I suppose you could do that, yeah. But most of the time you can't. So, anyway, the point is, most Romans want to have the last rites. It's an extreme notion. And the thought is, and it's not always true. Sometimes somebody doesn't die at that spot, they die at hospital. And you don't know whether they got last rites or not. But that's where their journey to death began, let's say. Okay, they got a bad accident, they died in the hospital. So still a cross is put there. And when you go by that, you do this. Okay, you don't necessarily have to sing any words. But your action, according to the church, your action then sends a message. And the message is, bless this guy, even though he didn't have last rites. Or woman, whoever it was. Okay? That's the idea. Okay? And so that's why they insist, the family members insist on keeping those things. And you'll notice, like, I don't know if some of you were here, when there was a two-way road between here and Vincent, Ohio was two-way. Yeah. And especially, we had a commander here at the post one time. He was a nut and yet he had MP jeeps going up and down that road all the time. And especially if you were in the service, you were not speeding. Oh man, he was really. So anyway, you get behind some soldiers, who are coming back from someplace or whatever. And I mean, they were not going 56. They were not going 57 and a half. Most cases, they weren't even going 55. They were going 54. Just to make sure they, oh man, that was horrible. Anyway, when they expanded, and they had crosses alongside the road, when they expanded, the highway workers moved the crosses to the exact same spot, only directly east or west or okay? And that you'll see that happening along interstates when they widen them from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. You see when they put in new interchanges, all kinds of stuff. The highway workers. If they don't move them, it doesn't matter because the pendant will just come back and put new ones in. And for a while, I think it was in Kansas, the governor in Kansas decided it was stupid. I think he was Baptist. I don't think it was Huckabee or anybody, but it was something like that. And so he said, I don't want those things out there, it's stupid. And it didn't happen. Every time they pull one out, a new one would be planted. And then they pull it up, a new one would be planted. Finally gave up. Okay. That's good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
about the crosses? And this is not meant to be funny, but when people do that as they're passing the crosses, does it help the guy out of purgatory quicker?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it does. In their theology. Yes, it does. And so, as you might know, okay, let's skip down some examples. Let's go to 98. Some examples of rituals that are sacramentals are making the sign of the cross, bowing the head, or bowing deeply, sometimes from the waist, folding your hands. Okay? Movements of sacramental too. Genuflection. Okay? Genuflection can be 2 ways, of course. 1 knee, 2 knees. I used to do that a bunch. I can't get up anymore, so I don't do that. Prostration, Luther did that every single Mass. Every single service that Luther did, even after the Reformation, he still prostrated himself before the consecrated elements. Let's see, imposition of ashes. The ashes themselves are a sacramental too. So when we do imposition of ashes, like the Romans do, for them it has a deeper purpose. The recital of blessings, the washing of feet, the celebration of the canonical hours, and the seasons of the liturgical year. So if you would keep the canonical hours, which the canonical hours are during the day, there's certain hours that you set aside for prayer. Okay? I think the modern canonical hours, I think there are 7. Used to be 10, 9 or 10, I forget. But now I think they're down to 7. And if you follow those, and I know many Roman lay people that do, you follow those, and that is a sacrament. Exorcisms is a sacrament. There was some push in the past to make exorcisms a sacrament, but the Pope and the cardinals decide that they wouldn't. The reception of minor orders is a sacrament. So if you're a deacon or a deaconess, that is a sacrament. And the churching of women. Does anybody know what the churching of women means? There's a historian for you. Yes?
It's so many days after the birth of the
Yes.
child.
Very good.
And they go to be purified or.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so many days after a woman gives birth. In the Old Testament, of course, you had 30 days after your birth. In the case, I think, of a male child and a female child, was it 60 or 90? I think it was 60, but I'm not, don't quote me on that. We looked it up later. And then they could come back to the synagogue or come back into the assembly. Okay. In the New Testament, for some reason, this carried over into the New Testament. I've done a little bit of reading about it, and I never really found a reason why. I think that it maybe was just part of their culture, and so they ameliorated it into the church, and made it official. That's the only thing I can think of. There's no moment when it was declared to be so. It just was always that way. And so a week or a month, in most cases, after a woman gives birth, then she shows up in church again, and they make kind of a big deal. That's what churching is doing.
Aren't you supposed to baptize your child as soon as you can?
Yeah, but that's not done in the church service. No, that's a separate service. Yeah, but that's not counted the same. And in many cases, the baptistry is separated from the altar, chancel, and nave. The baptistry is off by itself. I know, for example, in one case, I had a good friend whose husband was Jewish, and she was Roman, and she had committed some sin and was excommunicated or whatever. But she wanted her baby baptized. This was before they became Lutheran. And she told me, she said they met at the side of the church, and another couple who were not excommunicated was inside with the priest. They opened the door, the other couple received the child from outside. Then they took the child to the baptistry with the door open so that the parents could watch, baptized the child, and then brought the child back and handed the child back to the parents, still outside the door. They were not allowed to come even into the baptistry. Okay. So this kind of thing was not so much anymore, but it was very common, especially in more conservative parishes. This was in El Paso, and so actually it was in the city, but it was very, very conservative, and so that was very common. That thing, and the same thing happens if, for example, you're married outside the church. If you're not married by a priest in the church, then your marriage is illegitimate, and your child is illegitimate. But the church still will baptize your illegitimate child the same way. You have to hand the child off to somebody. You can't come into the church yourself, because that is a mortal sin to be married outside the church. That sin will not even put you in purgatory. That one used to put you in hell. No exception. Tony, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. About that churching of women, what exactly is that supposed to accomplish, and how is it done?
It's a special set of readings and prayers. If you look at the old liturgy books of the Lutheran Church, you'll still see it there. I don't have one handy on me right now, but you'll see it in our old books too. The old German Lutheran Church or whatever did the exact same thing. And it's a liturgy. It's responsive readings, prayers, and Bible readings, and the whole thing. And it's giving thanks. The idea is giving thanks for a safe birth. And remember that for a long time in human history, birth was just about the most dangerous thing a woman could do. And up until recent times, I've seen figures as high as over 50% births could be deadly either to the child or to the mother. And in the Middle Ages, it was very common for men to have 5, 6, 7 wives because of this, because they wanted to have 10 or 12 children. And, maybe you get away with it once, maybe you get away with it twice or 3 times. I had an ancestor, I found out going through ancestry, I had an ancestry named Hiram Spencer, who lived in North Carolina, who had 7 wives. And I thought for a minute, Hiram Spencer, that's a good Mormon name. I thought maybe he was a Mormon. But no, it turns out that 6 of his previous wives died through childbirth.
It's common to see in the cemeteries in the South.
Oh yeah, it's very, very common. And so the churching of women was a kind of a big deal. It's like, hey, you made it! Hallelujah! We're happy for you. Yeah.
You wonder why it is that humans have such a hard time in childbirth, where animals do it naturally.
Yes. Well, I think
It's very
the
natural.
curse of sin. Real simple. The curse of sin. Yeah, the curse God put on Eve and all women. Not only in pain when you bear children, but in pain when you bring forth. And to bring forth means raise. So not only will be a pain in your rear end coming out, but there's going to be a pain in your rear end the rest of your life. That's really what God was saying. And that sometimes is not picked up by people. All right. Do I call our church women status tonight? Statues and icons also. Down there also bells, fire, the candles, blessed salt, crucifixes, holy oil, holy water, incense, liturgical vessels like chalices, medals, palm branches, religious habits, and scapulars. Okay, habits is the clothes the nuns wear. Scapulars are things that you can wear on your wrist or on your head, like the Jews do. Okay, those are called in Judaism. Those are called phylacteries. In Romanism, they're called scapulars. Rosaries, or a series of beads, of course. The vestments that the priest puts on are sacramental, and wedding rings are sacramental. Okay, so all of these things, okay, just about everything you touch, everything you do as a Roman can be a sacrament. Okay? Consummating the marriage is considered by the Roman Church to be a sacrament. Okay? As a matter of fact, sex in general is considered by the Roman Church to be a sacramental as long as it is done with the purpose of creating children. Or at least not with the purpose of avoiding creating children. I think we've expanded that. So you might not know, say, if you're fertile that particular day. You might not know. But as long as you're not putting impediment in the way of being pregnant, then it is considered by the church as a sacrament because you're doing your duty. Okay? And that duty, by the way, by the church, the Roman Church sees the duty as a two-sided. Give them credit for that. Okay? It's not just woman's duty, it's the man's duty too. So, at least they're equal. The liturgy of hours, I'm not going to go into that. Down in 101, devotions to saints. And other prayers and stuff like that. Veneration of relics, visited sacred shrines, pilgrimage, processions, stations of the cross, holy hours, Eucharistic adoration, benediction of the Blessed Sacrament, the Rosary, and so on and so on and so on. So all of these things are either sacramentals or they are helps in other ways. Okay? Devotionaries, meditations, and so on and so forth. Oh, church hierarchy. I don't know that I want to spend a whole lot of time on that. The church has, let me just say, 102, the church has a hierarchical or episcopal structure. What does that mean? Okay, holy order. Okay, so our congregations too are ordered in a episcopal way. The word episcopal does not mean the church father in this sense. The word episcopal means bishop because that's the meaning of the word in Greek. Okay. So the idea is that a Episcopal type of church has a head, okay, in our case like a Senate president, and then it has bishops, in our case, district presidents. Okay. You might say we have cardinals and archbishops. These are heads of committees, like the chairman of the Board of Missions, World Missions, the chairman of the Board of Home Missions, the chairman of the Board of Education. That kind of thing. You might call them archbishops or cardinals or something, I suppose. And then circuit pastors under the district presidents, which would be maybe their bishops too, but lesser bishops, and then the pastors. And so on. The pastors are just that, pastors, shepherds of the flock, and then the people come among that. So that's the Episcopal system. In other words, there's a hierarchy. Okay? The congregational system that America really invented back in a long time ago, even before the Revolution. The congregational system is that the group of people, the congregation, is the boss. And everything they decide on, either by majority rule or through committee or whatever, those are the rules. And they impose those rules on whoever they ask to be their pastor. And then they elect the administrators of, if it gets to be a church body, then they elect those guys. And so the Baptists are the most congregational. We don't have congregational churches anymore. They ceased to exist. They got wrapped up into the United Church of Christ. They were congregational. Baptists are very congregational. The Assemblies of God, the Nazarenes are very congregational. Most of your Reformed churches, especially the Armenian decision theology types, they're mostly that. The Methodists are kind of funny. The Methodists and Presbyterians are both a little bit of both. They have a hierarchy that sometimes is imposed from the top down, but other times is the bottom rebels and upsets or gets rid of the top. So the Presbyterians are Scottish, as you might know, and John Knox, the head of the founder of Presbyterianism, he was a real he liked to rule. He was kind of a tyrant. And so the Presbyterian Church takes on a little bit after him. But if you know anything about the Scottish clans, you know they're very independent. And the reason why the English beat the Scots is the same reason the North beat the South in the War of the United States. Because the South was very disunited. And the Scottish tribes, or clans, were very disunited. And so Presbyterianism is a little bit of both. The Wesley brothers, who invented Methodism, somewhat the same way. They wanted their church to be congregational, but they also knew that the people had problems and issues, and that the people weren't necessarily always spiritually sound, let's say. And so in the Methodist Church, you have bishops, and you have a conference of bishops, and that kind of thing. But yet again, the congregations as a whole tend to be kind of a long congregational line. The one thing that the Methodists like to do, still to this day, is they like to move their pastors around at will. In other words, you won't know. You'll be serving a church someplace, and all of a sudden the bishop will call you up and say, you know what? You've been there 6 or 7 years. I think you need to move. And so you've been in you've been in Tucson all this time. You like it? Tucson? Yeah, I do like Tucson. Well, good. We're going to put you in Poughkeepsie, New York. Have fun. Yeah. They still do. Not as much as they used to, but they still do. All right. So anyway, Roman is like that. Roman is top down, Pope on the top, and then the cardinals, and then the archbishops, and then the bishops, and then the monsignors, and then the pastors, and then your parish priest, and the deacons, and the deaconesses, and like that. Let's skip the whole thing about deacons and all that. You read that on your own. Not really much there I want to go through. I'll leave that to you. The whole stuff about deacons and things like that. There's one interesting section. 110. Paragraph 110. Look at that for a quick minute. The theology of the laity called the charismatic mark, characteristic mark of Vatican II by Paul VI and John Paul II was complemented, in some cases influenced, by the rise of many lay ecclesial movements, lay church movements, and structures of the 20th century. Examples are Focolare, the Neo-Catechumenal Way, the Communion and Liberation, and the Opus Dei. You may have heard of the Opus Dei. That's because of Brown and his books on Leonardo da Vinci, the Da Vinci Code, and all that. Opus Dei has gotten a reputation now as being kind of like the secret society of the Romans. It's really not. It never was meant to be that. Dan Brown, I think, kind of took a little license. And most of the Opus Dei people that I've talked to over the years, they're not really happy about Dan Brown's book. They think that he really messed up their reputation. And they don't think their reputation is deserved. They are not an armed militia operating in the Roman Church. They are, I will say this, they are fanatics. No two ways about it. And they are fanatics for tradition and traditional ways. They, for example, do not want to see any kind of movement of women into a role in the liturgy. You may know that some of the more progressive parishes will have women reading one of the readings, not the gospel, but the epistle or the testament. They don't like that. You'll see some parishes with women being distributors for the Holy Supper. They don't like that. They don't like anything like that. They will fight just about any progressive or modern renovation in church, in the liturgy. Some of the Opus Dei people like the Latin liturgy. They prefer the old pre-Vatican II. It's called the Tridentine, and not for the Trinity, but because of the Council of Trent. It's called the Trent, T-R-E-N-T, the Tridentine Mass. So it's Latin. They like that. And I will say, my mother-in-law, who is a Roman, my wife is in Focus School. Anyway, my mother-in-law said she really enjoyed the Latin service because growing up in Philadelphia, if you were doing something on Saturday or Sunday, and you weren't going to make it back to your own home parish, her home parish was a Polish parish, if you weren't going to make it back, it really didn't matter. Because all the Roman churches in town all had the Latin Mass. And so you knew that. You were taught that in Focus School, in day school, and so it didn't matter where you went. You know, it's kind of like in the Lutheran Church. Some of you may remember traveling across country in the 50s and 60s, and it didn't matter whether it was an early or Wells church you stopped at. Every single church had the exact same liturgy, word for word, and followed it word for word. And you could be in Albuquerque, or you could be in New York, or you could be in Virginia, or you could be in California. It didn't matter. Every single Lutheran church, confessional Lutheran church in the country, Missouri, Wells, and the West, all have the exact same hymnal, the exact same liturgy, the exact same hymns, and everything else. And so you're going to walk into a church you've never been to in your life and feel completely at home. Suffice to say, that does not happen anymore. In spades. I told my wife the other day, where in the world are we going to go to church when we're returning? It's a long commute from San Diego. And that's even considering the guy after me keeps the things as they are. Which, I have to tell you folks, I'm just being honest with you, the chances of that are slim and none.
Well, therefore you don't go. I mean, there's a simple answer to that. You don't leave.
Well, I'm sorry. That's, Go ahead.
You mentioning the similarities of the services and how easy it was to flip from one to the other. I was raised in a Roman church. First time I went to a Lutheran church was Kurt. the similarities were such that I could
without-
follow the service
Yes.
real easy,
Yes,
and it slipped in, and
Yes.
it was
I would
not
say
strange to me. But
more
that,
than, more than half, way more than half of new members that I received here over 24 years, former Romans. And for that exact reason, that they feel very comfortable. And I think the Lutheran churches that are messing around with contemporary worship and all that, I think that they're losing that. They're giving that up. They're not realizing that people, especially Roman Christians, who are looking for something a little better maybe than the legalism of Rome, they're not going to feel as comfortable as they did years ago in our churches. I don't think they realize it. I told them that, but it was in one ear right out the other. Let's take just a few minutes on ecumenism. The last part. And this is something that has been a big change in the Roman Church. This is huge. This is probably the biggest change in the Roman Church since the Reformation. While the Catholic Church sees itself as a church founded by Jesus, it recognizes that many of the Salvific churches, salvific is just a word that means saving also. Elements of the gospel are found in other churches and ecclesial communities also. The Second Vatican Council document, Lumen Gentium, says that the one church of Christ, which in the creed is professed as the one holy Catholic and apostolic, subsists in the Catholic Church, which is governed by the successor of Peter and by bishops in communion with him. Although many elements of sanctification and truth are found outside of its visible structure. In other words, before Vatican II, if you were not an actual member on the roster of a Roman parish, you were outside the church, which meant you were outside salvation. Because they still teach that salvation is found only within the church. And by that they mean the Roman church. That's why they like to use the word Catholic, and I don't. Their word Catholic means this is the only church there is. Yeah. And after Vatican II, in case we don't get that on the page, after Vatican II, you all are Catholics, whether you know it or not. Whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, you all have been declared by the Roman Church to be Catholics. Every single solitary one of them.
even those who left the Roman Church.
Yep. Unlike Mormonism. If you leave the Mormon Church, you're not a Mormon anymore. No matter what. But if you leave the Catholic Church, then you still remain Christian. Although nowadays I'm not even sure that matters. But let's say you join a Baptist church. You're a Roman and you become a Baptist. Okay? You're still a Catholic as part of the churches, as part of the Roman church. That's why I insist on using the name Roman rather than Catholic. Because when you use the word Catholic, you are agreeing with the Pope. You are agreeing with him that the church, the Roman church, is universal. And that everybody's a member of it, whether they like it or not. And so I shy away from that word and prefer the word Roman. Verse 115. At the same time, it affirms, quote, the church now sojourning on earth as an exile is necessary for salvation. There you go. Whoever therefore, knowing that the Catholic Church was made necessary by Christ, would refuse to enter or remain in it, could not be saved. Now, the key there is knowing, okay, that the Catholic Church was made necessary by Christ. Obviously, if you join the Baptist Church, you don't know that. Okay? Obviously, if you join the Lutheran Church, you don't know that. So there's a little bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, a little contradiction going on. Okay? In other words, if you're outside the Roman Church, you're still Catholics, even though you don't know it. But if you're really obnoxious about it, you can't be saved. So it kind of depends on one's interpretation. In short, the modern Roman Church seems to have it both ways. Ecumenical in the extreme, taking everybody in, and yet exclusive in terms of salvation. Still, the Roman Church has, since the Second Vatican Council, reached out to other Christian bodies seeking reconciliation to the greatest degree possible. Significant agreements have been achieved on baptism, ministry, Eucharist, Lord's Supper, with Anglican theologians, that is, the Episcopalian. In October 1999, a similar agreement was signed with the Lutheran World Federation on the Theology of Justification. The same document was adopted by the World Methodist Council in a tripartite signing ceremony that took place in July 2006. These landmark documents have brought closer fraternal ties with those ecclesial communities. In other words, by all intents and purposes, the Episcopal Church, the Methodist Church, and the Roman Church are one church. By this agreement, four. Okay? Romans, Lutherans, Episcopalians, and Methodists are all one church. And Roman priests can preach and distribute communion in any of these churches, and a Lutheran, Methodist, or Anglican can do the same in a Roman church. Although, I have yet to hear of an example of that. Roman priests very frequently show up at Methodist, Lutheran, and Episcopal churches and serve in the liturgy. I have not heard of an example. There may be one out there, but I have not heard of it, where a Lutheran or a Methodist or a Episcopalian has shown up at a Roman parish and served as the priest of that liturgy at the Mass that day. I've not heard of it. I don't know that it's ever happened. It may have been, I don't know, but I do not.
Hypocritical, Methodists don't believe it's blood in, blood.
Yeah, I know. Who cares? However, recent developments such as the ordination of women to the priesthood and acceptance of homosexual relationships present new obstacles to continued reconciliation. Consequently, in recent years, the Roman Church has focused its efforts on reconciliation with the Orthodox churches of the East, with which the theological differences are not great. Relations with the Russian Orthodox Church were strained in the 1990s over property issues in countries that were formerly Soviet boundary. These differences have not yet been solved, most notably the parishes belonging to the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. However, fraternal relations with other Eastern churches continue to progress quite well. The Ukrainian Church very recently declared itself outside of Rome's influence. This was a big deal. They also declared themselves outside of Moscow's influence. In other words, the leader of the Ukrainian church said, we are not Russian Orthodox and we are not Roman. We are Ukrainian. In other words, we manifest a completely separate entity within Christendom. And that made Rome and Moscow very unhappy. And that made Putin very unhappy. Putin, you can say a lot of things about the guy. One thing he is, at least he professes to be and shows himself to be, and he puts on a show, he professes to be and displays that he is a fanatical Russian Orthodox Christian. Big time. And he really thinks that the entire eastern half of the eastern sphere of the world should belong to the Russian Orthodox Church. And it also should belong to the Russian state. All right, next time, when the vicar is here, I have sent him, and it will be available for you, an excursus number 2 on all about the Virgin Mary. Okay? So anything you ever wanted to know about Mary, and I mean anything. Things started out as 2 pages, it's now 8. So, an 8-page study on everything there is to know about Mary will be led by Vicar Isabel. So, let's close. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen.